slide. So, like I said, I'm Judy Hendricks. I work at Sandia National Labs. We have the New Mexico Small Business Assistant. I'm one of the project managers. John Martinez is the other one at Sandia, and it's a joint program with Los Alamos. So we also have project managers at Los Alamos. John Garcia, John Rogers, and Amanda Garcia. And the program, it's based, we get a tax credit. So that's why it's a for-profit company. Some people say, gee, why can't I be a nonprofit? For this program, because we get the state tax credit that funds us, all the companies and the state says, yeah, let's have them all for profit because then you're all paying taxes. The idea is economic development. So that's really the goal. And the idea, of course, you know, the state legislator was really smart, thinking, okay, in the national labs, you have all these smart people, you have tons of scientists and engineers. How can small businesses access that expertise? So they created this program. It was in 2000 it began. So we get 2.4 million from the state. So you know, the idea, companies here, you know, you can to be able to work with a scientist or engineer at the lab for free. It's a great program. So, and what do? We can test your prototype. We can do some consultation, design work, imaging. We have really expensive equipment. You know, we have every type of microscope and lots of, you know, fire testing, all kinds of drop zone testing, you name it. We probably have it. So it's a great way to access really expensive equipment. And you're working with one of our engineers. We also do modeling too. Next slide. So yeah, as a small business, you have a technical challenge, whether you're creating a new solar panel and you might want some help. Do you want access to really expensive equipment? We have hyperspectral imaging, really cool. I know they're like $500,000 microscopes that, and of course we have scanning electron microscopes, other electron microscope, SEMs, all kinds of microscopes that you can imagine. Do you have, you know, a prototyping? You might need some help testing that. So it's really anything you might need. Testing a model, doing advanced imaging, material science. You got some materials, maybe you really need some help characterizing them. So all those things, you know, we have material science, we have tons. And I think this is usually where I talk about all the different types of scientists that we have. People don't realize that Sandia, we employ 14,000 people. Los Alamos, I think it's about 11,000. So we have geologists, biologists, chemists, I mean, every type of engineer, optical, you know, electrical, cyber, space. We have energy guys for solar, wind. So it's beyond even energy. I'm surprised sometimes the backgrounds, you know, of all the people, you know, whether it's agricultural things, lots of different types of programs. And what we don't do, the idea, we don't want to compete with small businesses, right? So you come for help. We're not gonna, you know, some people that have a great idea want a prototype made. We don't make prototypes. Usually you make a prototype, maybe you need help testing it. Maybe if you're in the early stages, you need some help designing the prototype, and you can work with us. But we say the company, you make the prototype, we can help you test it. Of course, we don't do like websites or apps. You know, there's lots of companies here that can do a website or app for you. So it's really something that's not commercially available at a reasonable cost. And as a small company, you might be thinking, well, gee, how do I know if this is something available or not at a reasonable cost? I would say just apply. That's kind of my job, is figure out if this is something, you know, if you need a website made, that's, you know, but sometimes you need some consultation, some design work, access to their, you know, specialized equipment. That's where, you know, the uniqueness comes, and at a reasonable cost. It's really hard. I mean, I actually working with, you know, some of the people that, some of the NASA projects, there's people doing space work right here. It's kind of hard sometimes to do testing, and maybe you need some testing of radioactive materials and things like that. But it's really hard to find that as a reasonable cost, right? But you know, Sandia, we can do that kind of thing. So, and we don't, obviously, we don't provide cash or materials to the company. we're going to solve your problem. You probably get a written report, hopefully with the solution. So, and we partner, of course, I'm talking about the engineers at Sandy and Los Alamos. We also partner with tons of people in New Mexico. MEP, Manufacturing Extension Partnerships, they're the experts when it comes to manufacturing. So they know all about lean manufacturing, but also just like process design control. So the idea, even if you're on an R&D facility and you might need some help with process control, MEP will actually go to your facility and they can optimize your whole manufacturing or your process control. So we team with them, University of New Mexico, School of Engineering, and the Management of Technology, doing projects with them. Whether it has to do with computers, and they have some really specialized equipment also. We also work with, of course, New Mexico State and, mining and technology too, New Mexico Tech. So the idea, some people think, oh, I'm doing maybe something on a rancher. We work with ranchers, and of course, New Mexico State does a lot of agricultural issues, things with, we did some stuff with pesticides. So really, if you have a challenge, a technical challenge, apply to New Mexico Small Business Assistance, knowing with all the people we're partnering with, it's more than likely we'll be able to find the right engineer or scientist to work on your problem. So we talk about success stories, people we've helped before, like say we get that 2.4 million each lab from the state of New Mexico. So we follow the economic development. That's one thing, it is free. We ask you to do surveys. The company, we're going to want to hear how many people you hired, did you get grants, how much did your sales increase? So we can go back to the state and say, yeah, what kind of impact we're having. So in the past, we worked with wildlife protection management. They were working with feral horses. The idea of you want to add contraceptive to horses, and you want to make sure every time you're working with a horse, it's a new horse, right? So basically, we did face recognition with horses. So they had wildlife protection management. They were already working with some cameras out in the field trying to identify the different horses each time. So they had called us up. We got them with our sensor guys and our robotics guys. We have a whole building of this robotics, right? So when it comes to sensors and robotics, we have a lot of expertise at the lab. So they've been working on that project. Osada Energy is here in Albuquerque. They actually, when we talk about solar panels, as they get thin, you make really thin and narrow solar panels. Sometimes cracking is an issue. So they created a paste to help prevent that cracking, but they wanted, they really needed to understand a little bit more of the materials and what was happening at the microscopic level. So we did some electron microscope imaging, we did some other material characterization, and they recently got a really nice project with DOE. I think it was for $1.5 million. So, sometimes companies just need a little bit of help. The idea, working with our scientists, and most of these projects, last a few months, but to be able to solve the challenge and help you go on and to go, get some really great economic development for our state of New Mexico. Cisneros brothers are in Berlin, and this is a good explanation of how we don't make the prototype, but sometimes we help design the prototype. Cisneros brothers company was started by their grandfather. And he first was doing ductwork for houses, started out of the back of his pickup truck, and now they have a big manufacturing facility in Berlin. And as they were expanding, they wanted to get into the pharmaceutical market. So they needed some help with design for the ductwork for pharmaceutical. I was saying we don't do certifications or any of that kind of testing. We're an R&D facility, right? So they had a design for their ductwork for pharmaceuticals. So they brought that in. They worked with some of our engineers, doing some consultation on that design. Then they went and made a prototype. So they had a prototype ductwork that would, work well for pharmaceuticals. They needed some help testing it. So they came back with their prototype, and we actually did some testing for them. So I think it's a good, kind of a good overview of how we say we don't make the prototype, but maybe we would help you with your design, work with your engineers, you make it, come back, and then we'll test it with you. So what are the qualifications? You're saying you have to be a New Mexico company. We're working with the New Mexico state tax credit. So that's why you have to be in New Mexico. Have to be for profit, because for profits pay taxes. So this is defined by the state when they created this program. Small business, and most on our website define small businesses. I'm really we're excluding Intel, and that's really big businesses. Most all businesses here would be a small business. You need your state tax ID number, and I know they just changed the name of that tax ID number, but through the state of New Mexico, you have a tax ID number, your CRS number, and that's what you really need. And like I say, when it comes down to you need some help, like I was saying, of course, we're not going to do make your website or an app because people could do that down the street. But if you have something really kind of unique that's not available in private industry at a reasonable cost, that's why we're here. We're not going to give you cash and materials, but hopefully we solve the problem. And then you can go on like Osada and get the 1.5 million contract with you, right? And we work with the calendar year. So usually we talk about projects going on 3 to 4 months. And to be honest, most of our projects sometimes will last longer than that, but at least by November, end of November, our money turns off. So all projects will end in the calendar. And a company is allowed 1 assistant per year. So you can, sometimes you get, you're working with the engineer and you get these great ideas and you solve the one problem and you realize, wow, I have another issue. You could apply next year. That's a different statement of work. So for individuals, projects, that's one, it's just one business coming, have your challenge. You come and say, oh, I need help. I had one person, she was creating a new sewing tool. Very small business, in the garage. She created the prototype and she needed help testing it. And at first, I kept this and I was like, wow, a sewing tool. We have an internal website sometimes where I'll put, a request on. And it turns out one of our engineers, she's older than me, but she actually was a seamstress. When she first went to school, she wanted to be an engineer. Actually, she was told she couldn't be an engineer because she's a woman. So they said, you could be a seamstress. So she became a seamstress. Like I say, she's a little bit older than me, not that much. And then she went back to become an engineer. So she's an engineer now, but knowing there was someone who created a new sewing tool prototype, she knew all about sewing and things too, and about design. So she actually worked with the company. They did a lot of testing of the prototype. That was what became one of our success stories. So that prototype for this for embroidery, I believe, you added on to like an existing sewing machine. She sold hundreds of these. So it doesn't, whether you're the mom and pop organization or you're on your way up, hiring 50 people, any small business that you got a technical challenge, that's who we're trying to help. So, and we talk about, we talk about urban companies or rural companies. Right now, Bernalillo County and Santa Fe, so Albuquerque companies and Santa Fe companies are called urban, and that's defined by the state of New Mexico. So you can get assistance worth up to $20,000 of the engineer's time. And if you're outside those counties, which that's the rural New Mexico, you get $40,000. And that's set up that way because when they really want to help rural New Mexico. So you can actually, and it really depends on the type of project. Just because you're rural doesn't mean, oh, I'm going to get, $40,000 worth of assistance. It comes down to the engineer saying, how much time do I really need? And then, the engineer kind of knows, if you're coming for like fire testing and you have your materials, he can kind of gauge, how much time do I need? But for real, you can use up to $40,000 worth of the engineer's time. So, and it's really, the funding is used for the engineers and the scientists. So they can buy materials. They're not able to buy laptops or computers or anything. Of course, they should have that to do their work normally, but you're really getting the engineers time working on your job. That was an individual project. And then we have what we call leverage projects. And the leverage call, we do it twice a year, and the leverage call is open right now. I have some paperwork with me about the leverage projects too. The written submissions are due September 14th. So the idea for leverage, you can have like 2 or more businesses coming together, so you have the same kind of challenge. I have my robotics guy in Alamogordo. So there's one company that's dealing with robots on land. There's another one dealing with drones. Another company in Alamogordo was actually looking into making the lithium batteries. So all those lithium batteries, they all, needed to know basically the state of charge of lithium batteries. So sometimes it's not obvious when you're dealing with these, these are massive lithium batteries. They're about 8 pounds of dollars. They're really, we're trying to understand the state of charge and state of health of the lithium batteries. So those companies all came together and said, we all want to know about lithium batteries, but for different reasons. They wrote a leverage project proposal saying what their problem was, what the solution was. They submitted it. For leverage, you do a presentation to our board saying basically what the problem is, the solution is, what's going to be the economic impact. So if they're successful, that was about 4 or 5 companies around the state. So the idea, if they're successful, they're all going to hire more, get more grant money. That's what we want to hear. So they came in with their shared challenge. You can get up to $120,000, $100,000, assuming you got, like if you had 3 companies in Alamogordo, each of those was worth up to $40,000. So I've had one, like Albuquerque used to be $10,000. Now it's 20. But one time I had an Albuquerque leverage project. There was 10 companies in Albuquerque that came together. Actually, that was one of the solar ones. They were working with their suppliers. So it's not the customers. You're not asking your potential customers to join in a leverage. It's people you're currently working with that you're consulting with that have the same challenge. Like the Alamogordo, all the battery guys, robotics guys. They all needed to know the health of a lithium battery. And at Sandia, I'll tell you, we have a department that's all they do is lithium batteries. When we employ 14,000 people with so many different backgrounds, when you get a leverage project, if you get one for like 100,000, you're really getting a team of people. So we have a battery experts and interns, and that could be a year project. So to really understand the state of health, helping them, they were developing a prototype to understand the state of health and how much energy was left in each of these giant lithium batteries. So it still goes for the calendar year. And usually the calls for the leverage, when you have many companies coming together, usually that's in January and September. We do the call, but all the projects will start in the beginning of the year. So even though we're doing the call now, we team you out with an engineer, you do a proposal, you submit it, money will start in January. And if you do the presentations in January, then it starts in March. So, but the leverage calls are just twice a year. It's a great way to access a large pot of money. And the requirements for our projects, we're always dealing, of course, what we call a principal investigator, the PIs, the engineer or scientist that's really overseeing the project. That's one of our staff members. They work with the company, they work with me. And of course, we have to make sure whatever we're doing meets all the safety requirements for the lab. And then for the small business, so usually we ask one person to act as a point of contact for the business. And that's who's dealing with me and dealing with the engineer. And the main thing is a lot of times we're testing samples. Doing one project with a company in Santa Fe that's looking at some rainwater. Then it's like getting samples. So the idea. A lot of our projects are dealing with samples to make sure the company either can make enough of the prototypes that we're testing or to get the sample of rainwater or whatever we're testing for you. Since these projects, it's helpful when the company is ready to go. And there's paperwork, of course. We put our statement of work in the document. We need that signed at the beginning. Like I say, of course, and we need at the end, we need the customer satisfaction surveys and economic development surveys. But considering you're getting an engineer's time, if I work $20,000 to $40,000, you really just have to do a couple of surveys and sign some paperwork. And I think that's what makes these great success stories is when the engineer and the company work really well together. Sometimes they have meetings every other week. A lot of it's virtual, but when the company can really have time to work with the engineer, because you're the experts in your prototype and to be available to answer all the engineer's questions and provide the samples. In Mexico, small business assistance, we've done projects in every county. Even, some of these, like we're saying, there's more cattle than people, but we often do agricultural. I was working with Butte Creek up in northern New Mexico. They were looking at, they had to design some things to prevent the stock tanks that the cattle were drinking out from freezing in the winter. They had a solar pump that they had created that we're testing. We also were doing the things with some of the balls, the black balls that keeps the heat in. So, even like I said, it's amazing how many projects we have going with ranchers. Like I say, when we employ 14,000 scientists, that's really all fields, whether it's geology, biology, it's not just engineering, energy work. It's really, I'm amazed. Our robotics guys are doing stuff with limbs, artificial intelligence. So it's like, whenever you have a problem, we probably have an expert for you. So. And this is, we bug the companies to do their economic surveys. So then we can go back to the state and show them, we get 2.4 million and we spend 2.4 million. We can't spend more than 2.4 million. That's always the trick. We have to spend exactly 2.4 million of the engineer's time. So then we ask the companies, how many people did you hire? So I think we even have it. So we're close to, now we might be at 10,000 jobs that we created throughout the state of New Mexico with the help of this program. And, increasing the revenue of sales for these small companies. It's amazing. So, like I said, if you're working with New Mexico Small Business Assistance, please do the surveys, because then we can report back to the state. Every year, we're often going, to the roundhouse. Every year, sometimes they talk about doing away with state tax credits. And the labs were saying this project, this program wouldn't exist without the state tax credit. So it's important to do your surveys. Let us know, how many people you hired, how many grants you got. Even if we had a cost avoidance, that's something huge too. So, and how to apply for assistance, what a great program, I want to apply. I want free assistance from the national labs, right? Or one of our partners. So it doesn't even matter if you think you might want help with any from MEP or one of the universities or Sandia or Los Alamos. It's basically one-stop shopping here. You go to our website, NMSBA You'll see a button that says submit request for assistance. And it's a one-page application. I don't think there's probably too many other applications for the national lab. It's just one page. Of course, it asks you for the name of your company, your address, obviously be in the state of New Mexico, what's your contact information, your email. And we really just need a sentence or two, what the challenge is. And like you're saying, I'm working in cybersecurity, having some issue, developing my blockchain. I'm creating the newest and greatest solar panel. I'd love to talk to some, people that experts. Whether you're creating your sewing tool, you have a young inventor, they what you call a hot seat, to let parents know if a child is left in the car. And she was like, I think when she first came up with her idea, she was like 18. So it's really, for when you apply, you need a sentence or two. Sometimes it's helpful to say what your business is, what your goal is, but really just a sentence or two, what you're trying to accomplish. And then within 5 business days, a project manager will contact you and ask you more about your technical problem. But yeah, within 5 days, I'll be calling you or John Martinez or people from Lano, getting some more information. Then we usually, we talk to some of the engineers. Sometimes we post things internally, because it does, of course, sometimes people say, well, yeah, I have this problem. I need to talk to a solar engineer. Of course, we have to find a solar engineer that has time. So what we call their mission work comes first. But a lot of our engineers, a lot of the stuff they're working on, it might be a 4 or 5 year program to come and work with a company and solve a problem in 3 or 4 months. They love doing this stuff. They can see a result, they get to meet the company, they feel like, it's, we have some really great engineers. So, but it does always come down to their mission work comes first. So it's finding an engineer that has time to work on projects like this. And usually after you submit, I usually, try to get a meeting with you and the engineer or scientist, so you can really talk about what the challenge is, so the engineer can understand kind of the whole picture, what do you really need help with. And these are all the project managers, Los Alamos and Sandia National Labs. Yeah, feel free to, NMSBA program on that website. We actually, there's some other information about success stories of the companies we work with. It also has the leverage call. The idea if you have multiple companies that all have a similar challenge. So right now that call's open for the written proposals. Yeah, we'd love to hear from you. Like I say, it's no cost to the company. So it doesn't, a 1-page application with a sentence or two what you need help with, it doesn't take very long to apply. So we have some questions. People here at Fat Pipe, yeah.
Can you read out your email right there? Because it's kind of in that line. Is it JK?
It's JKHENDR@sandia.gov.
HENDR?
At sandia.gov. Yeah. And I do have some literature here too that talks about the program. What's your question? That one, they had been applying for these type. Actually, it wasn't even a grant. It was like, what do I call it? Oh, yes. So she was bringing up with OSADA that they were able to, do a project. We, were able to do some scanning electron microscope with them, some material characterization, and then they were awarded actually a big DOE contract. That's what it is. And she was wondering if we helped them get the contract. So the company was already applying for the contract. So the idea now the company understood their materials better and could say more definitively what it could do and understood if it wasn't doing what they wanted, why it wasn't. So it was really just solving their problem. So, but then the company went and got that. So by solving their problem, they were able to access a lot more, just increase sales and get out there. And of course, when I talk about, when you talk about access to expensive equipment, they bring in their sample. Of course, the Sandia is the one, using the equipment. And sometimes, it depends. Sometimes the people can come and observe. I have to even observe some of the testing. But sometimes, they bring their sample in, so I have another sample in. We were doing some SEM on something and looking actually for dark matter, doing some physics work. But to go in and be able to go, so of course, like they're in the basement of one of these buildings in Sandia and actually look at the SEM. And the company was able to come and observe. But yeah, when we were talking about the expensive equipment usage, of course, the Sandia is the one running the equipment. But sometimes the company comes to observe. Even with like fire testing, I had a company with lots of samples. And we have a little control chamber to do fire testing. And the company did spend the day at Sandia so they could watch to see. And it was great. The technicians love it because they think it's still really fun to have things catch on fire and stuff. And then to have other people with them watching. Yeah. Yeah, there is another program. There's a question about PTAC, and that's another government program that helps people access when you're trying to sell things to the government and understand about the contracts and things. So that's a great program. Yeah, that sometimes once a company solves a problem and is able to hopefully make a bunch more or whatever they were doing by solving the problem, hopefully they can go after much bigger sales. Okay. What's your question in the back?
When did you say your contract or fiscal year ends?
Our fiscal year for this program
Yes.
ends technically, I talk about end of November, it goes with the calendar year. So I say by the second week of December, the money turns off for us. It starts in January, we get our tax credit.
Pay and have money available for projects this year?
Right now, we still have money available for individual. Yes, we do. Yeah.
So I've been trying to pursue something I started almost 2 years ago. And so maybe I can help you.
Yeah. Like I say, to submit, just going to NMSBA It's a one-page application. Is there another question online? Or
I do have a question online. It's actually from OSADA Energy. And they would like to know if you have previously received the NMSBA award, are you eligible to apply again in the future?
our company's allowed one assistance per year. So OSADA, we say, we're not doing a continuation, but you have a different statement of work. A lot of times we solve one problem and then you realize there might be other issues, or you have other ideas for different projects, right? So a company is allowed one assistance per year. We tend to emphasize companies, especially at the beginning of the year, January, the state tax credit begins. For us, we do emphasize companies that we haven't worked with before and rural companies, since the program was really designed for those companies outside of Bernalillo and Santa Fe. We do emphasize in the, as much as we can, So sometimes in January, people want to apply and I might tell them to wait because you're from Albuquerque or I worked with you before. But yeah, companies can have one assistance per year. And it's always pretty much, going to the website, saying what you need. And, we look at what kind of economic development, so the idea, what kind of economic impact, by doing this, you're going to be able to hire people, get grants, whatever. So, you had a question?
Yes, it's not like, I know that you can't write a letter of support for getting a grant. You had an NMSBA grant, but can you use your logo?
Well, that's a very good question. Yeah, so for New Mexico Small Business Assistance, we say it's actually written in the terms and agreement document that the program is not to be used for marketing purposes. So we're not endorsing your product or service. So yeah, we say we don't want to see our logo on your website. I mean, we're working with you, we're helping you solve a problem, but it's not to be used for marketing purposes. So, because it does, if our logo appears there, it kind of infers that we do endorse your product or service. So in that contract, it says we can't endorse a product or service, but the idea you have, now you have some results probably that says something works really well. I like to say we don't certify anything, but you got some great results, and hopefully that leads you on to getting that success. So yeah. Any other questions? So yeah, like I said, knowing that it's a one-page application. So knowing it's a one-page application, like I say, people think, oh, are you a New Mexico company? Are you for-profit? Yes. Small company? Yes. You got your New Mexico tax ID number, and if you don't, you go to the website. I think you can get it in a day. Might be 2 days now. So it's so easy to apply. So just a sentence or two, what you're currently working on, and then within 5 business days, one of the managers will give you a call to probably get more information. Hopefully, after that, we will set up a meeting. Now we're doing more virtual meetings, but get you talking with an engineer to see if that engineer part of, I think at the beginning of the year, I think I had to do maybe like, usually, hopefully the first engineer is a good fit, but sometimes engineers like, hey, what you're asking, this is really, not exactly my wheelhouse. So sometimes I had like set up 3 meetings with 3 different engineers for one project. But by the 3rd one, that one, hopefully it's a perfect match. And that's what really makes success stories, is when the company is really involved, and I find the right engineer, and we can solve the problem. So yeah, I'd love to hear from you guys. That's our contact information. And like I say, we pretty much will do individual projects. We get our money starting in January. We still have money for the individual projects, leverage. We're about that call. We'll need the written proposal September 14th. But individual projects are open until we run out of money. And usually, sometimes that can be, late into the fall. Right now, it's with COVID, things are slowed up a little bit because I'm not able to go out as much and talk to companies one-on-one. So yeah, it doesn't hurt to apply. And a lot of times, sometimes people apply in October and it's like we get everything set and then maybe we'll start the project in January. If we happen to run out of money, we get the 2.4 million starting January 1st. So yeah, it's really, I think, it's the best program there is for small companies for profit. I'd love to talk to you guys, just, to really get things set and going. You go to the website and fill out the information. So I appreciate you guys having me here. If there's another question.
I was just thanks to you. I always love to hear, and I have for a long, long time. I always love to hear the case studies. Some research the file are really our small
like I say, when we employ 14,000 people just at Sandia, and I think it's 11,000 at Los Alamos. So that's a huge amount of scientists and engineer. I have some literature, it talks about the success stories from 2020 and a little bit more information. You know, feel free to take it. You can hear, you know, sometimes it's helpful to see what we did with the other companies, what were really helpful, what type of engineers we have. And it's like I say, it's pretty much the whole range of any type of scientist or engineer, any type of project. So thanks so much. And like I say, we have money, so we're looking for new projects. So appreciate it. Thanks.